I think a prime example where Ohio has led the way is universal changing stations or changing tables. We're starting to hear from more councils across the country that they're starting to implement that. And as you know, Governor DeWine came to us on what day was that? We had the I can't remember their names, but I know who you're talking about with universal changing stations. They brought in a table and legislators got to see. We set up in a room and they got to see what these are and kind of learn why they're important. And I think even before the governor, sought money in the state budget, the state house said, we're going to install one of these, right? Whether there's money or not, the state house was one of the first entities that say, yes, we're going to install one of these.
And so that's just such a great example of how people have come together, partner, and now we've started a trend, and now we've influenced people outside of Ohio. Welcome to Season 4 of the Direct Line podcast from Lighthouse Cove. If you've been with us for a while, you might notice a few changes this season. As many of you know, the Ohio Alliance of Direct Support Professionals stepped into a new chapter this year as Lighthouse Cove, a community of practice for IDD professionals. And with that transition comes an expanded vision for how we connect, learn, and share ideas across the field. One of the exciting changes for 2026 is that the Direct Line is now available in both video format on YouTube and Lighthouse Cove TV Plus, as well as audio on all of your favorite podcast platforms, making it even easier to stay connected to the conversations shaping the future of our workforce. Another new twist this season is that instead of a single host, members of the entire Lighthouse Cove team will be rotating into the host seat, bringing different perspectives from across our programs and our entire community. I'm Bethany Toledo McCrae, Executive Director of Lighthouse Cove, and I'm excited to kick off Season 4 of the Direct Line with you this year. Today, I'm joined by Paul Jarvis, Executive Director of the Ohio Developmental Disabilities Council. Welcome, Paul.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad you could join us. I was just talking about, Lighthouse Cove and how we've stepped into this new chapter. And I know it's a new chapter for the Ohio DD Council. So tell us a little bit about that, maybe your history and how you got started and where you are today.
Sure. I'm going to go back a little bit of ways, but I was working in the Ohio House of Representatives back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and had gotten a call from a colleague, former coworker, and he was the liaison for what is now the Department of Developmental Disabilities. And he let me know, hey, there's DD Council's looking for a public policy person. And I'll be honest, having worked in the legislature, I didn't even know what DD Council was. And so it was kind of okay, well, who are these folks and what do they do? And so as I learned and applied for the job, I was selected. I think part of the reason I was selected was the legislature had not known who the DD Council was, and they wanted somebody from within that body to kind of bring recognition, acknowledgement, and increase the visibility of the council. So in 2005, I was hired as the council's public policy staff person. And I think over that time, um, my goal was to get council recognized as a trusted voice on disability issues, right? So we have all these projects that are looking to do new things and create new paths to services, and we just wanted to make sure that the legislature became aware of those and on the other end of that heard the voices of people with developmental disabilities and their families. So yes, worked for council since 2005, and I knew kind of early on that I would want to, when the opportunity came, become the director. And I want to say within the first 3 years of working for the council, the previous director decided to retire, and for me, that was too early to take the reins, right? We talk a little bit about the onboarding at council, both for staff and for our board members. And the running joke at the time is it takes 3 years to understand what the council is and how to do the job. And so I was right in the midst of that first 3 years and knew I was not ready for the role as the director. So when the opportunity finally did come up this past year, I think that it was probably the worst kept secret in the disability community was that Paul Jarvis wanted that position, and so I did apply and survived the very rigorous interview process and was named in December.
Hey, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
So you said it takes 3 years to, kind of know and understand what DD Council does. I'm going to ask you to share that in about 5 minutes.
Okay.
So our
Yeah.
audience, yeah, can just get a better idea. I mean, so Lighthouse Cove, formerly OADSP, has a long history with DD Council. But when I
Yes.
was first introduced over 10 years ago, I had never heard of the Developmental Disabilities Council. And I had spent, the first 10 years of my career as a DSP, and then about 6 years in the programming aspect as a program director. And I had never heard of you guys, so I know there's a lot of people out there who maybe not have not heard of you, or if they have no idea what you guys do.
Sure. Yeah. So to answer the first part of your question, I think why does it take 3 years to learn what we do? I we have we just to share, like in the last month or two, the governor has appointed some new members of our council. And one of the first things I wanted to do was look at our orientation process and what we do. And so I went and found our orientation manual, and it is 400 pages long. And yeah, and so, hey, congratulations, you've been appointed to a new board. Here's 400 pages of material to read. I've actually been working with the staff over the past few weeks. We have orientation scheduled for next week, to bring that manual down into something that's a little more digestible for our members. So, basically, what we're trying to teach these incoming members, you'll get a sneak preview of our orientation next week, is that, council does things on a 5-year cycle. So we adopt a plan that funds projects for 5 years. Okay. And so that cycle is a 5-year cycle. So we are in year 5. We're about to finish completing our next 5-year plan that'll run from 2027 to 2031. So these new members coming in, we're throwing some stuff at them that the council's been working on for several years. But what we want to demonstrate or illustrate for them is that, like, once we complete this process at the end of 5 years, we go back to year 1 and we start all over again. So the development of the plan takes typically 3 years. So once we adopt the plan, we'll issue grant awards. And the council's responsibility in that first 2 years is to provide continuous monitoring and oversight of, like, how is the project working? Are we headed towards the goals and outcomes that we had envisioned 3 years ago or 5 years ago? Um, and then in around year 2 or year 3, we'll begin the process of planning the next 5-year plan. So, in 2029, 2030, the work starts anew, and all these new incoming members will be a part of the beginning of this process. So just quickly, the 5-year plan is a collection of grant projects that the council has designed, and we hope to award those projects early or later this year.
Okay. And so when did the Developmental Disabilities Council form? Like, how long has it been around?
Oh, you're going to ask me to remember specific dates. I didn't know this was
Just
a pop
general, just
quiz.
general.
I want to say the first DD Act was maybe in the late 60s. And then DD councils, like state councils on developmental disabilities, are created by federal law. In addition to the councils that are created by that law, the law also creates what we call DD Act partners. So many folks are probably familiar with Disability Rights Ohio. They're created by the same federal law that the DD councils are created under. It's called the Protection and Advocacy Organization. So every state in 5 or 6 U.S. territories have a DD Council and a P&A. And then the DD Act, the federal law, also creates university centers of excellence for developmental disabilities. In Ohio, we have two of those. We have the Nysonger Center at Ohio State University and Cincinnati Children's Hospital at the University of Cincinnati. So yeah, the DD Act was created, I want to say in '69. Forgive me if I don't have the date
We're not going to
exactly
fact
correct.
check.
And then, the way the federal government operates is that once they pass something, it expires after a certain number of years, and they have to reauthorize those programs. So the last time the DD Act was reauthorized was in the year 2000. So we're a little overdue for reauthorization, but so long as Congress, agrees with the mission and vision of the statute, they can continue to fund those programs.
Okay. Cool. Um, so what are you most excited about as you've stepped into your new role? It sounds like you guys are in the midst of that, the 5-year state plan, like getting ready to, offer, what's the word? Grants, the notice of grants here coming up. But what is it that you're really excited about?
Well, so when I interviewed for the position, one of the things I presented to the board was that in the 20 years that I have worked for council, the council has kind of been structured and operated the same way, and I think that resonated with the board chair and with the board members that, hey, maybe it's time we looked at the way we're structured and the way that we do things, and look at maybe some changes. And so, I don't think that they'll happen overnight. Like I said, we have this 5-year cycle, but I think during this next 5-year cycle, I know the board chair is committed to looking at, is council structured the right way? Are our grants meaningful? Are they producing results like we'd like? And so that's what I'm excited about is that, okay, like, we have 7 issue committees. It requires us to meet over 2 days. There's a lot of work involved with conducting 7 committees. And the committees generally focus in different areas, so there might be some, not intended, but some siloing that occurs because, hey, we're just focused on this one area of emphasis instead of, hey, how does this area impact 3 other areas? So those are the things I think I'm excited to tackle over the next 5 years, and hopefully in that next 5-year state plan that the council has, there's a clearer picture of what the council's trying to accomplish through the different grant projects that we'll have.
Okay, thank you. And I'm kind of looking at my notes because I had a few questions for you, but you've already hit on quite a few of them. So let's see here. Can you talk a little bit about collaboration across the disability service system and just how that continues to be so critical?
It's um, it is I can't stress enough how important it is. Earlier this week was the DD Awareness and Advocacy Day at the State House, the kickoff event at the State House, and to see all of the different organizations that come together to support this common mission of providing support, empowering people with disabilities, and making sure that people live the life that they want to live it's critical, right? And so backing up just a little bit about refocusing on meaningful change in the 5-year plan, the more council can be involved with other organizations that are on the front line, right? So our projects don't provide services. Typically, the other organizations through county boards or through the DSPs, the Lighthouse Cove, and through the Providers Association, you guys are on the front line. The council is not. Now, our members see that on a day to day basis, but it's helpful to be engaged with those organizations who are experiencing firsthand challenges, barriers, are trying to develop solutions to address those. And that's where council grants can come into play and try to address those solutions. So collaboration is critical.
All right. So what is it that what message would you like to give to professionals and advocates and partners? What do you really want them to know right now?
That's a tough question. I'm still kind of new in the director's role. But you know, council I think most of the professionals and organizations know this already. Council wants to be a partner, right? Our board members are involved in a lot of other organizations and groups. We want to be your partner, and the only way we can do that is by knowing what is going on with you and in your daily lives. So, I want us to at least be viewed as somebody that is open and willing to listen when folks have issues. And so what we try to do through the many committees that we have is we invite third parties to come in and give us updates. So it's not just about getting updates on grants, but it's learning about new initiatives that council may or may not have been a part of creating or developing or even supporting, but learning about what's going on, in this area of the state or that area of the state.
Okay. I have one final question for you that might be kind of like, one of those questions that'll send us down a rabbit hole. But my final question is how can people support council? How can DSPs, frontline supervisors, and even, whole provider organizations contribute to the work of council? And as I was thinking about this question, I'm going to kind of double barrel it here. I was thinking about, maybe you could even share a couple of examples where in the past you know, um, something that maybe wasn't on your radar was brought to you by a professional, by a DSP.
Oh, that's another trick question you popped on me there. I don't know. Like again, I'll say this week, the DD Awareness and Advocacy Day event, council provides a grant to support that. And, every couple of years, we get asked like, hey, you should name this like DD Council's Day. And um, I, at least from my perspective, have tried to say no. This day doesn't belong to DD Council. It also belongs to the providers and to the DSPs and to the county boards and to the department and to the many other organizations. And they support us by bringing folks, by participating in our projects. And it's not just that. I think the council has the DSP white paper in action, and
Mhm.
so we have these projects where we can provide the resources, and then you can collaborate with other organizations through the resources we were able to provide. I think that's where you can, where folks can support council is engage in our projects, right? Even if you aren't a direct recipient of a grant, you can still engage in that project. The more engagement we get through any of the different projects that we fund and support, the better data that we can collect, the more likely we are going to reach that outcome that entity is trying to reach. And then we're also always looking for board members to serve on the DD Council. So the way the federal law is structured is that the council must be made up of a majority of adults with developmental disabilities and family members of either young children or adults who cannot advocate for themselves. And so, to serve on council, it's a 3-year term, and you're eligible to be reappointed for another 3-year term. So that's 6 years. So as you can see it through our 5-year
Mhm.
cycle, you're likely going to experience every step of that 5-year planning process at least once. But we're always looking for individuals with disabilities to serve on council. It's kind of a rotating thing where we have a handful of members every year. Their terms have ended and they're not eligible for reappointment. So that's another way you can support is apply, become a member, um, raise your voice in advocacy, and help us develop that plan.
I love that. One of the things we've been really focusing on the last couple of years at Lighthouse Cove is empowering direct support professionals and frontline supervisors to gain the skills to be able to speak up. And I'm really excited because through a grant from the DD Council, I'm able to take 2 DSPs to Washington, D.C. here in a few weeks. And I think you guys will be there as well. And so that just makes me think about, like, we talked a lot about Ohio, but it's not just Ohio that we're impacting. It's really the whole country. So I
Yes.
I know I said one more question, but I'm famous for, saying that a couple times. So so one more question. What ways, like, outside of Ohio, do you see the Ohio DD Council having influence and impact?
Oh, these are not easy questions. How dare you? I'm not sure. It's difficult. Just to back up a little bit on the DC thing, though. Let me talk about that. So, one of the great things about being interconnected with the DSPs and with the providers and with the county boards and other organizations like OSDA and People First, last year there was some serious concern about DDAC programs being defunded through this new administration. And so those organizations all came together and said, okay, we need to do some education and some advocacy. And so, councils are not really permitted to say, hey, you need to fund us, right? Because we're funded with federal funds. We can't lobby for our own funding. But those other organizations stepped forward and said, we will do it. We think that the services, the programs that the council, not only the councils, but the DDAC partners like Disability Rights Ohio and the two USEDs are critical for moving Ohio in the right direction for services. And so, outside of Ohio, that's how we came together. We came together as a group and we went and advocated with Congress. Now, in my new role as director, I am becoming more involved with our national association and beginning to learn a little bit more about what's going on with councils across the country. I think a prime example where Ohio has led the way is universal changing stations or changing tables. We're starting to hear from more councils across the country that they're starting to implement that. And as you know, Governor DeWine came to us on what day was that? Was that Wednesday? That seems like a week ago. But yeah, he came to us to Wednesday to talk about Ohio's initiative over the past couple of years to increase access to universal changing tables. So in that aspect, Ohio generally is not a follower when it comes to policy. We are kind of a leader in some senses. When we implement new ideas and new projects, we start to see that being copied in other states.
And it's wonderful. I remember it, and I'm not good with dates either. It was probably 3 or 4 years ago, and I attended a council meeting, and that's where I met the 2 women that were advocating for the universal changing stations. And I remember thinking then, like, this is so much bigger than providing access to community. Like, this helps direct support professionals, like, do their job, and it helps family members be able to plan vacations. It's just it's massive, and it's been wonderful to see it grow and to, get to know the people at Universal Changing Stations. And we were at Kalahari for Synergy last year, and I think 2 years ago we actually had one that was brought in to use, and now Kalahari actually has one there. And
Yes.
so, that's a direct result of, funding and support that came from the Ohio DD Council.
Yes, yes. For the DD day, one of the DD days a couple years ago, we did the same thing. We had the I can't remember their names, but I know who you're talking about with Universal Changing Stations. They brought in a table, and legislators got to see. We set up in a room, and they got to see what these are, and kind of learn why they're important. And I think even before the governor, sought money in the state budget, the state house said we're going to install one of these, right? Whether there's money or not, the state house was one of the first entities that say yes, we're going to install one of these.
And so that's just such a great example of how people have come together, partner, and now we've started a trend, and now we've influenced people outside of Ohio. So thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Hopefully
It's
we can invite you
been my
back.
pleasure. Yeah, it's been my pleasure.
All right. Well, have a good day, and we will talk to you soon.
All right.
With the launch of Lighthouse Cove, our work continues with the growing and renewed direction of our podcast, The Direct Line. With conversations, stories, and on-location interviews, The Direct Line supports the mission of Lighthouse Cove to educate, elevate, and empower professionals across the IDD field. Tune in to the Direct Line podcast, brought to you by Lighthouse Cove every Thursday on YouTube and all other podcast platforms. Lighthouse Cove, it's more than a name. It's who we are.